The country of Niger, Africa, is getting closer and closer and closer to an all-out conflict. But things are getting really confusing because within Niger, you have internal militant attacks. Outside of Niger, you have the potential of an all-out invasion within Niger. But to make things even more confusing, you have Russia who's saying, "We want peace," but they're also using Mali to try turning some of the political strings within Niger. Let's watch this clip.
Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with Mali's military leader in a phone call on Tuesday about the recent coup in Niger. That's according to a social media post from Mali's interim president, posted on social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter.
I don't know how much more evidence I need to show all of you with Russia's involvement in Africa. How they're trying to use this facade of "we want peace, we want you guys to work together," but we're having these internal phone calls with Mali that literally fell apart and use the militant group Wagner to all of a sudden bring the country to peace? And I'm not trying to use Wagner as clickbait or some sort of way to form a story. It literally is happening in front of our eyes. Wagner goes into Mali, Africa. They secure the nation, but they do it in a way that pushes all militant groups out of the country into a country like Niger and other surrounding African nations. You then have turmoil within the country of Niger, but then you have Wagner groups saying, "We would love to work with you guys." It's literally happening in front of our faces. Wagner is Russia. Russia is Wagner. They are co-equal. They work together. And of course, Russia having these talks with Mali, it all makes sense, people.
Influence in Western Africa. Niger has strategic significance for the United States, China, Europe, and Russia, and has served as a hub for foreign forces fighting a regional Islamist insurgency. It also has a wealth of uranium and oil resources. In a statement, the Kremlin said the call was initiated by Mali and was focused on ending the situation, quote, "through peaceful, political, and diplomatic means."
Now, having peace is a good thing. I don't want an all-out conflict. Do not get this twisted. But also, do not be tricked with this whole Russia wants peace. We're going to use Mali to talk for peace, because we are very quick to forget that Mali had said if any intervention happens within the country of Niger, military intervention, Mali and Burkina Faso are willing to go in and help Niger to back them because they support the coup. Now, does it make sense that they're tied in with Russia and all of a sudden they're willing to go in with a military intervention? Yes, because when you work with the mercenary group Wagner, you also get tied in with arms deals and you get tied in with working with Russia. So obviously they're going to have some hardware and military technology probably provided by the Russians. So obviously they're not that afraid to go in and work on behalf of Niger and work on behalf of the Russians. Now look, we are not going to skip over the fact that a big reason why countries like working with Niger and they like to be there is of course their resources through uranium and through oil. But nonetheless, the US military especially has proven that they invest in Niger, Africa due to their strategic positioning within Central Africa and their ability to launch drones and to work with neighboring African nations to fight militant groups. I do stand by that. If you think I'm wrong, you can leave your opinion and comment down below. We are allowed to have differing opinions, but nonetheless, the U.S. military has invested millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to be there with the U.S. military.
Have been seen at rallies, waving Russian flags. Military leaders in Mali and Burkina Faso have kicked out troops from former colonial power France, while strengthening ties with Moscow.
Okay, so why things also get a little more confusing is that the common enemy for a lot of these African nations within ECOWAS and within this region of Niger is you have these militant groups who are causing chaos within Niger, attacking the professional military, attacking villages, crossing from border to border. And this really could be the factor that brings everyone together. That was the common enemy again for ECOWAS. But nonetheless, now you have Niger actually who was attacked during all of this chaos when they're trying to figure out, are we about to be in an all-out conflict with these other African nations?
With that breaking news from Niger, where at least 17 soldiers have been killed in an ambush, the military leadership says that its troops were attacked by an armed group near the Tillaberi region. It also said its forces killed several of the fighters.
Now, the thing is this, whenever you look into these isolated attacks and where a lot of combat is happening within these militant groups, it's typically on the border sections of Burkina Faso and the border regions of Mali. This is because, again, these militant groups know it's a lot easier just to cross border to border because there is jurisdiction within the professional military. So how can a professional military communicate with another military if they're not friends, etc.? And when it comes to Mali and Burkina Faso, they do have Wagner, Russian mercenary group, who really does whatever it takes to push militant groups away from their combat zone into Niger. And that really is why the coup ended up happening, is that these citizens of Niger really didn't feel safe and said, we keep getting attacked, and now we want a new military structure, we want a new political structure where we can now protect ourselves and our citizens. But understand this, a lot of these attacks, isolated attacks, are happening on these border regions, again, where Wagner seems to be working. Okay, so from a U.S. military perspective and really an American political perspective, things are not quite clear as to where they stand when it comes to Niger, because they know it's a coup, but they're not saying this is a coup. They're saying, well, it's kind of like forming into a coup. I'll let the clip speak for itself.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. Yesterday in Niger, the military council that toppled President Bazoum said he could face the death penalty if found guilty of treason. Is it still your position that this isn't a coup?
So as you know, we continue to assess the ongoing situation in Niger. We are hoping that this can be resolved peacefully and through diplomatic means. We've come very close to say, again, that this is an attempted coup. I think by all means, from State Department, from DOD, from other levels of government, we are trying to work through this in a peaceful manner. As you know, Niger is quite a critical partner to us in the region, and so we are hopeful that we can resolve this in a diplomatic way.
Okay, look, I'm married and I try to be the best husband I can to my wife, but sometimes I forget to, take the trash out. And when my wife asks me, why didn't you take the trash out? I give that kind of answer. I'm like, well, sometimes, my knee hurts, but we were really going to do it. And I think, wife, we should really try to resolve this peacefully. That's the kind of answer I just heard.
Almost bending over backwards not to call it a coup, and we've seen France, the EU, and ECOWAS just come out and call it what it appears to be.
Well, again, I think we've been very clear that it certainly looks like an attempted coup here. We have assets and interests in the region, and our main priority is protecting those interests and protecting those of our allies.
Okay, what that translates to is we literally have billions of dollars in U.S. military assets, drones, troops, military bases. We've told the public that we need to be there, so they're going to be there. And look, I'm not hating on the U.S. military. I do think we should be there, and I do think those assets do help to at least put pressure on these militant groups to not recruit in the region and to at least cause some peace in the region. But nonetheless, again, this is what's happening. The U.S. military and the U.S. government cannot call this a coup. If they call it a coup, it is against the U.S. law to work with countries who are within a coup or have formed a coup. So the U.S. military will have to draw out all of their assets. We're going to have another Afghanistan 2.0 where these militant groups, or at least the military of Niger, will just walk right into these drone bases and take all the assets. And it's going to be another terrible look for the U.S. military and the United States, especially within Africa, where we came in there with a lot of promises saying we're going to help protect your region. But then all of a sudden we leave 20 years later. Again, it sounds like Afghanistan 2.0, literally. Okay, so here's a map of the African Union. The only issue is it's not quite accurate because these lighter green countries are suspended countries. Mali, South Sudan, and Burkina Faso also should be highlighted. Now, I'm just going to mention this. I'm just going to say this. I'm not jumping to conclusions here. These are countries who are highly tied with the Russians. I'm just saying. Nonetheless, the African Union is a coalition of African states who try to come together and to talk, economic differences and try to, unite as African nations. They're also really big on taking away colonial powers, which I think is a good thing within Africa. Africa has been played with way too much throughout history, and I think they want to take back what's theirs, which is great. And so Niger, Africa is under a lot of pressure from the African Union, but not only Niger, Africa, the entire region over here where ECOWAS is, the coalition of states out here, where the African Union is saying, guys, no military intervention, you need to stop. No military intervention whatsoever. But ECOWAS is saying, look, we have to go in with military intervention. If not, Niger, Africa is going to build a military or get overwhelmed with outside groups like these militant groups we talked about towards the middle of the video that ambushed other soldiers in Niger. So you can see why ECOWAS and African nations are so strict on not falling to a coup. You can see the collateral damage where when you fall to a coup, especially like a country of Niger, who was never that stable and was already having issues, it's causing issues throughout now the entire continent of Africa, which is not a good thing. The saving grace in this entire situation is that most of these African nations want peace, which is good, but the neighboring African nations of Niger, they say they want peace, but they are willing and have already started to deploy some troops in getting ready for an all-out conflict. Also, the country of Niger has been recruiting their own internal civilian military to get ready for conflict. So again, all roads seem to be pointing to a conflict unless for some reason somebody is willing to give Niger a ton of money and probably try to pay everyone off at this point. But unfortunately, it looks like Niger is saying, we are not going to stand down. We like our junta. We're going to keep him. And we are putting our former president on trial for treason because he's talking to all of you guys. He didn't go through us. We are in charge now. So that's a whole nother entire situation. But nonetheless, I will digress from this situation. Leave your comments and opinions down below. In my opinion, I do think we are leading closer and closer to an all-out conflict, obviously, and I don't want a conflict, but it looks like that's what's going to happen, especially if Niger is not willing to back down, especially if they have the country of Mali and Burkina Faso who are willing to back Niger in an all-out conflict. I don't think it's going to be a good thing if this all goes down. I hope it doesn't go down, and we'll see you guys later.